Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. It's one of the last sessions here for the day. You got the next happy hours. You got the events later today. So, on behalf of all of us, thank you guys for being here. My name is Jeff Brown. I'm on the Google Public Sector team, doing the state local for the West. This session is going to be about 40 minutes. We're going to do 30 minutes with the panel, and then we wanted to leave plenty of time, about 10 to 15 minutes for some Q&A from you guys. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce these guys. So I want to ask you a question, right? There's an interview question you might hear once in a while that says something like, tell us about a time that you went against the grain. Tell us about a time in your professional career where you did something a little different than other people. Everybody's going left, you decided to go right. The gentleman I'm going to bring up here made the right decision. They were the first state to go G Suite for all enterprise. So we're going to have two individuals from the state of Wyoming. The first is Governor Mead. Governor Mead was the 32nd governor of Wyoming. He served 2 terms. He started in 2011 in January, and just this last January, he finished his 2nd term, like I said. He was born and raised in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, literally God's country. Grand Tetons, Yellowstone, nothing to see here, nothing to see here. He went to University of Wyoming, go Pokes. He got his law degree, did a small little job working for like the district attorney, serving for the District of Wyoming. Prior to that, just an incredible background. As governor, he's done things for energy, he's done things for water, he's done things for a little thing called broadband. It's amazing. He was chair for Western Governors Association. And I think he would say his biggest accomplishment, though, is 27 years married to Carol and his 2 adult children. He said adult children, and one of them's like 19. Come on, really? Still kids. Joining him is Tony Young, and Tony is the former CIO up until about a month ago, and Tony served since 2016. Prior to that, he was the chief of staff for Wyoming. But if you talk to Tony, I think he's going to tell you he's a lawman. So he served 12 years. For the Department of Justice on their criminal. He was the coordinator for their criminal investigations, 20 years working for the AG's office. He has that background. But I think the bottom line, if you do the math, they've known each other for 30 years. So imagine the stories that they have to tell. Also joining them and moderating and doing the questions is Heather Sheston. And Heather's from the state of Arizona. Born and raised, she's got a bachelor and master's from ASU. Shameless plug, ASU is one of our longest standing G Suite educational institutes for about 9 years. Got to put that in there for you guys. She's got one of the toughest jobs in that, imagine taking 70 agencies, 70, with all, just like literally different businesses, with about 25,000 rolled over to G Suite today from our competitor. We still have another phase left, about another 15,000 to go, and another 30 agencies. Let's back up. 100 agencies with about 36 to 40,000 right in the middle of the migration. So could you do me a favor, please, and give these guys an applaud as we bring up Governor Mead, Tony Young, and Heather Sheston. Thank you. Come up here. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
So as Jeff mentioned, I'm Heather Sheston from the state of Arizona. My official title is Google Statewide Champion. And although that's a really badass title to have, what it means is I'm the program manager for our G Suite migration. As Jeff mentioned, we're migrating about 100 plus agencies right now. It's been a 2-year project, and we are at the tail end of our last 6 months. So for me, it's an incredible honor to be here to speak with Governor Mead and former CIO Tony as the first state to actually go Google. So if you guys wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more about yourselves.
Well, thank you, Heather, and thank you all for being here today. And Jeff, thank you so much for the kind introduction. I was impressed with your memory of my background and helped spur a few thoughts. I want to tell you a little bit about myself, but I want to tell you a little bit about my family. Everybody loves showing family photos to sort of give a perspective of where Wyoming was when we came into office and where we are now. And to do that, I'm showing this picture here. This is a picture of my great-grandmother and of my grandfather. And this is not a posed photo. This is, they were cattle ranchers, and this is a picture of them taking cattle up to the summer range. And I put this out there because I know for some of you this seems like a long time ago, but I knew both of them. I got to know my great-grandmother. My grandfather lived until his mid-90s. And I knew them, but I think about their life, and I even think about my life when I was growing up. I lived on a ranch in a fairly rural area. And we had our method of communication, other than face-to-face and letters, was we had what was a landline, and it was called a party line. And for those of you not familiar with a party line, you would pick up the phone, and if nobody was talking, because your neighbors all shared the same line, then you could dial. And I distinctly remember my mom telling me, you know, the etiquette on party lines, which was, you know, if somebody's talking, don't listen in. Of course, as a young person, I interpreted that unless it's very interesting, and then listen all you want. But I think about that time, and that, you know, I'm in my late 50s now, but that wasn't that long ago. And the picture of my grandparents, great-grandmother and grandfather was not that long ago. And it's relevant to what I want to talk about today with regard to Wyoming. Wyoming is the 10th largest state geographically, but we are by far the smallest in population. We're a very large state with great people. And we're very proud of this picture. Actually was taken in front of the Grand Tetons. We're, as all governors are, we're very proud of our state, the first national park, first state to have women to vote, first actual government in the world to give women the right to vote. And of the first we celebrate, we're also proud of the fact that we were the first state to go Google as well. And we needed to do that, and one of the reasons we wanted to do that is you have these vast spaces, very low population. How do you connect people? How do you leverage technology so that you have same competitive advantages as you would, for example, in a larger state? And so that's sort of where our story started. As Jeff mentioned, I was governor for 8 years, and one of my top priorities was to push on technology and to use technology as a great equalizer with telemedicine, telecommuting, teleeducation. And that's part of the Wyoming story, but it started with our work with Google. And so I'm very glad to be here, Heather, and thank you for moderating between Tony and I, who have known each other for 30 years, and it can get very dangerous up here without you moderating.
Okay. Well, thank you. It's a real honor to be here. I'm Tony Young. By way of background, I've been married, happily married to my wife for, it'll be 40 years this year. We had 4 children, and moved to Wyoming in the early 1980s. I was born and raised in Idaho, just over the hill from where the governor was born and raised in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Came to Cheyenne, and I went to work for the Attorney General's office, and my background, which I think is a little bit unique, was I was a police officer. I worked as what's known as a criminal investigator or special agent for the Attorney General's office, and I did that for nearly 20 years. During that time, I became fascinated, obviously, with investigation and focused on that as my career. And I would say in the mid-'80s to even the late '80s, we started to see the proliferation of technology in the use of criminal enterprises. And that's how I got involved in the tech, for the most part, tech industry. I became the state's, at that time, the state's first forensic certified examiner for the state of Wyoming, and became what they call the expert. The expert's the guy that comes in with the briefcase, I think, in the courthouse. Anyway, I had a briefcase, and I came in, and I had the credentials, and we started to work on, you know, criminal enterprises and using technology, that were using technology. As you know, any business that, legal or otherwise, is going to automate sooner or later. And so that was my first foray into that. And then we started working on internet crimes against children, computer and identity theft, things of that nature. I transferred from the Attorney General's office and went to work for the United States Department of Justice at the United States Attorney's Office. At the time, Governor Mead, prior to being governor, of course, he was an assistant United States attorney, and then was appointed by the president to serve as the United States Attorney for the District of Wyoming, Fortunately, when he came into office, he did not fire me, and I was able to stay on and work with him for a few years there. Then he decided to run for governor in 2010, and I left that job and worked on his campaign. And then, as Jeff said, I went to work in the governor's office until 2016. In 2016, the gentleman that the governor had hired, Mr. Flint Waters, who's actually in the audience here today, I've got to pick on him a bit. Google stole him from the state of Wyoming, and he works for Google now. And then I went to the governor and I said, I really think I could pull this off. I'd like to be the CIO. It was about 20 minutes of laughter. He said, no, really, let's see if we can find a CIO. And I asked again, and then he said, are you serious about that? And finally, he gave me the job. So that's how I kind of ended up as the CIO. I just recently left the 1st of March. And that puts us here today. But it's been quite a ride. It's been quite an interesting series and chains of events and firsts, so to speak. So let's move on.
All right. Well, thank you guys again. Thanks for being here to share your story with me and the team. So there's a bunch of people in the audience that are probably getting ready to go through a big G Suite migration, or maybe like myself are in the middle of one. Can you guys share your lessons learned? What were some of the hurdles that you ran into as you were migrating onto the platform?
Well, we're limited in time, but there was definitely some hurdles. But it was. I knew immediately upon getting to office we had a need for change, and part of the change that we wanted to look at is when I took over the different agencies. We had 13 different email systems in the state of Wyoming, and depending upon which one you were on, you couldn't necessarily pull up an address from another agency. It was just a mishmash of different things, and so I wanted some change there. And then on top of that, you're elected in November, you have a transition office, and then shortly after the transition office, January comes and you're sworn in, and then, days after you're sworn in, you give your State of the State address, which is an address to the legislature and to the people of the state on the condition of the state. And collaboration is really important to me. It was as U.S. Attorney, and it was even more so as Governor. And I had a great team I had put together for my office. And before the first day of the state, we spent probably about a week having different meetings, and we met in a big conference room, and we would go around the room, and I would say, here's this paragraph, what do you think about it? And the different staff would say, let's make this change, let's make this change. But the way we were doing it is I had my chief counsel was taking notes on a paper, and then she would go back and type in the changes and come back, which was all working well until the eve of my first State of the State. And for those of you not familiar, I was a little nervous, just, hey, this is my first State of the State. This is one you actually kind of want to do well on. On the eve of my first State of the State, we lost the entire document. And what we had was pieces of paper from the different iterations all across the office, and we had to try to put that together, put it in a package, because we had to also publish it at the same time I gave the speech the next morning. And so these are just a couple of examples of some of the challenges we faced. And so when we began the work with Google, it was apparent to me that we needed some improvement and we needed some changes. But what I didn't recognize, my own fault, was the agencies can become very provincial, and they can be very attached to their version of whatever they're used to using. And I get that. You get used to using something and you want to use it and you want to continue to use it. So when I said, we're going to make this change and we're going to go to Google and everybody's going to do it, there was some pushback that I didn't anticipate because it seemed apparent to me to be a good idea. And so certainly, Heather, one of the lessons that we learned is that when you make this, and you're going through this now, when you make this shift, you have to recognize people get attached to what they're using. And for the governor to say we're going to make a change isn't going to be sufficient. You have to take the time in training, you have to take the time in demonstration, and you have to recognize it's going to take some time for people to have buy-in. It doesn't happen overnight. And if going back in time, I think we would have done a better job up front saying, this is some of the challenges we have. These are some of the solutions. We're going to take time with training. We're going to take time with introduction to show you why this is a better way to go to address some of those challenges. So a short answer, Heather, is, at least for me, one of the biggest challenges was getting the buy-in, getting people to accept that while they may have used this such and such product for the last 5 years, that there is room for improvement, and that we weren't trying to make lives difficult. We were trying to improve their ability to do their job.
Yeah. I can attest to that too for the state of Arizona. I think some of the things that we've learned, we've given our IT teams early access so they can start using the tools with our project teams. They get trained up on it. They're able to share all of that information with their end users when they go live as well. But it definitely takes time to get the end users to start doing the things in G Suite that they couldn't do before.
Well, I can tell you, I definitely remember the night that we lost the State of the State speech. It was gone. I've coined this phrase, and I don't know where I stole it from somebody, but it was what we call an RGE. And an RGE is a resume generating event. I'm the guy that knew how to plug in the PCs and works on some of the tech, and of course when that document was gone, Tony, where's the document? What are we going to? Well, we're not going to suffer that again. We hired Flint as the CIO at the time. We also worked on legislation to change much of the culture that was occurring in the state of Wyoming that was very big. And these are the challenges that we met. It was a real rush. We consolidated. I use the term optimize now because consolidation seems to has a negative connotation to it. We consolidated all of the state's IT people. The governor had us put together statutes and regulations that would combine every agency's IT person into one entity, and that was the Enterprise Technology Services. At that time, we did have a CIO, but it was not a full-time position. That was a contract position. We merged the CIO's office with the Enterprise Technology Services, ETS. All of those people were brought in, and we brought Flint to stand that agency up. The difficulty of that is as you know, change is a horrible amount of pain for anybody. And immediately when we said we were going to go to Gmail, we're going to Google, we had every agency said, that's fine, but we can't do that. We are an exception to the rule. And I mean, I think the janitors were saying that, we're a little different. We need to stay, and then we had to convince so many different people in the directors and the agencies. It was really an archaic system that we were dealing with. I think at one time, I heard people, of course I'm exaggerating, when they were fearful of, if we use Gmail, we might get anthrax. I said, no, that's regular mail, and that comes in the form of a powder. But they had fears that were clearly unrealized and not. And so, in this particular instance, the director and even myself, and the director and CIO at the time was Flint, went around to the agencies. Every agency has one. They have that key person in there that knows, he's the computer guy, right? And we won them over with the features and then we saw, after a full analysis, Flint did a deep dive into what it was that we actually got with G Suite, and it really became a game changer. And those that people who really want to innovate and see that, once they saw that, they were, for the most part, they were in. But it was a struggle. It's a struggle today. It will be a struggle. So in our particular situation, we did a full deep dive and full due diligence on what services are we going to use, and we ended up with G Suite and some GCP and other products. That's kind of how we got there. That was I think our biggest challenge is, and if you're going to do this, you're going to find some cultural difficulties in a very big way. You've got to be able to address that.
Absolutely. So on the flip side of that, tell us about some things that went really well with your migration.
After the migration, I only lost 3 other states of the state address. No, I didn't. We didn't. No, that worked very well, and we really, in terms of the collaboration and at least the work that I did directly, to be able to reach out to people and say, take a look at this, go ahead and make the change in the Google Doc, see who makes the change. That works so much better, for example, than sitting around a conference room where people are looking, and did the governor just scowl at me? Did they get sensitive to that? Whereas if they're sitting in their office and I'm sitting in my office, they can say, Governor, this sentence you said here wouldn't make sense to a first grader or anybody else, so please remove it. And I think they can be much more, I think, emboldened to make the suggestions. And that's what I hire them for, right, is to make suggestions and to help guide me. So those things went very well. And then, there were some things that didn't occur to, at least to me at the time we were making the change, that were just wonderful things that we were able to use as a tool. And I'll give you a couple of examples, or one big example. One year, every year I am required by law on a date certain in December to present my budget to the legislature and to the public. And it has to be a sort of a public presentation to do that. The challenge I had one year, it was right after Thanksgiving, and I wanted to go over to Bahrain where we had troops serving and serve Thanksgiving dinner. And I couldn't do both. And so I decided I was going to go to Bahrain, but I was still legally obligated to present the budget. So I went to Bahrain, and Tony was with me after we served the troops on Thanksgiving Day. Then we went back to Dubai, and we were in the Dubai airport where they have these little sleeping pods. And the law doesn't say you have to be there in person for the presentation. So Tony had his little Nexus tablet, and we were in a sleeping pod, and his job, as I told him, you hold that thing steady. Because nobody wants a shaky governor, right? Hold that thing steady. And Flint Waters, who was actually on site in Wyoming, he was there, he was watching it. And I was able to present the budget through that little pad, and I was able to take questions and answers. And that was something I didn't anticipate. But that is, a great example in my mind of leveraging this wonderful tool to sort of be in 2 places at once. And we had a number of occasions like that where we were able to do that through the technology that we had after that first year.
That was kind of one of our big introductions to Hangouts, part of the G Suite, now Chat. But we did a Hangout on a 7-inch Nexus on a 4G connection, intercontinental, and it was amazing. It turned out very, very well. Thankfully for me, it turned out very well. So, but I will tell you that, as we see the opportunity to adapt and change, and Hangouts was a big one with inside Enterprise Technology Services. There's approximately 250 employees. And as you imagine, they've got offices and they sit around. We learned early on that every one of these members, for the most part, we issue them cell phones. So they have a cell phone, and then they sit down at their desk and they have a desk phone. And we did, what everybody, you've gone to VoIP and you've gone this. I will tell you, when I left ETS, I think maybe 85%, it might even be a little bit higher, of our employees at ETS no longer utilize desk phones. We don't need them. We utilize the cell phones, and everything we do is on chat. It's a chat or a Hangout. SMS messages that go back and forth. If you need somebody, you ping them. And that worked out very well for us. But as you might imagine, the huge savings that we had, the dollar savings. And so as some agencies, it's just kind of a de facto standard that state employees sit at a desk and they have a desk telephone, and then when they leave, they have their cellular phones. We pay for all of that. And trying to be conscious of the public's money and to be very conscientious about budgets, these are the tools and the changes and the culture differences that will bring about huge monetary savings for you. And that's what it was for us. We were able to, this collaboration, once those that got into it and started seeing it, they can see the value that's involved in that. The legislature sees that, and they see the value in that as well. We're reducing costs, but we're increasing services at the same time.
Heather, I'd just add to that, one of the other great things that happened is when, I think not just the public, but the private sector, the state saw us pushing to make things better with technology. We were really able to leverage that and do some other things. When I took over, we had 2 communities in the entire state that had Ethernet speed. And one of the things we did once we started pushing on advancing technology is we built a 100 gigabit backbone around the state of Wyoming that connects all the government buildings and all the schools. We were one of the low ends in terms of connectivity to our schools when we started. When we left, we were the best in the country in terms of connectivity. We started a broadband summit that grew every year, and the private sector really began to engage because they saw that we were actually trying to make improvements in technology in every front. We started the Jackson Hole Global Technology Summit that also has grown every year. But it wasn't, I don't think any of that would have been successful if they wouldn't have seen us. I mean, it's one thing to say you're interested in improving technology, and I remember once early on I said, we have got to do better in technology in a state. And a close advisor said to me, if you want the state and people to use more technology for telemedicine, telecommuting, be an example, right? Do it yourself. The state of Wyoming, if that's what you're saying, is a great equalizer and it helps a rural state like Wyoming. Start with government, right? Start yourself. Do it the right way. And so I think that there was a chain reaction after we started improving our own systems to be able to do some of these other things that have turned out to be very successful.
Great. So rumor has it, we have a little video of you guys.
Is there any disclaimer on this video?
So it's older, but it still has a good message and it still has good content. So we would like to share that with you guys today.
Wyoming has a lot of firsts. We had the first national park,
the first national forest,
and the first national monument,
and the first ranger station.
We're the first state to have a rodeo.
And rodeo is our state sport.
Wyoming was the first state to grant women the right to vote. That's why we're the equality state.
Don't forget to vote.
Now Wyoming is adding another first. We're going to improve our mobility and collaboration by putting 10,000 employees on Google Apps, saving the state of Wyoming $1 million a year. Wyoming's the first state to go Google.
Wyoming has gone Google!
Google! Sorry, just one more time, Really want to hit home with that message. Jeff's
It was good once. It was good. It was good.
Leave it. All right. That was a great video. Arizona doesn't have anything like that. I'm not bitter or anything. Okay, you told me to... I ate it, okay. All right, everybody knows now that you guys went Google.
Yeah.
I didn't even touch it that time.
What?
Alrighty.
What's this presentation about again?
Right.
I forget,
So the proof is in the pudding. And you guys talked a little bit about this. Can you tell us more about the improvements that you've seen as far as collaboration, financial, more efficiencies throughout the business?
Yeah, I can give a couple examples. One is, one of the big, one of the things you have to work through every year is the budget and the budget process. And before, what we were doing is every agency was coming in, giving a printout of their budget requests to me, and we would go through them. Very time consuming, very tedious, subject to mistakes. And with the G Suite, we became much more proficient in that, much more accurate, and many fewer mistakes than we were before we started. The other area I would tell you is that, just in our office, and I think this was reflective of all the agencies in addition to our office, is the ability to collaborate on Google Docs was magnificent. Yeah. And one of the people in my office, my chief counsel, a brilliant writer, was always, as was I in the beginning, notepad, yellow pad. We were both attorneys, and that's just the way you do it, and you're used to that. After a couple of years, we both got so used to using Google Docs, and to be able to track who made the changes, where they were made. That was so helpful to me in the speeches that I gave. She helped write a lot of my speeches, in the budget presentation, certainly the state of the state. And to be able to do that in my office, and then also know that we could do that around the state with the agencies, it led to this not only efficiency, but it led to a lot more crossover between the agencies. For example, we have a game and fish department, we have a Department of Health. They're viewed as separate entities doing separate work, but they shouldn't be. We developed sub-cabinets where they were working together. If the game and fish found, for example, wasting disease in wildlife that it could affect human health, they have to have this collaboration. And to have a tool rather than walking across the street or across town or drive somewhere, to have this tool of collaboration that was provided by G Suite, I think just really helped the agencies become more efficient, working better together. And I think we saw a lot of improvements.
Well, yeah, clearly we did. That was probably the biggest force multiplier that we had, was the ability to collaborate with. That, coupled with the Office of the CIO and the ETS, and this culture change that brought about, when the right hand knows what the left hand's doing. I remember coming in, working in the governor's office, all these contracts for, hundreds of thousands, or some in millions of dollars. This kind of broaches into the GCP, the cloud platform, and the APIs, and the programming that we were able to do there, again, expanded with app dev. We would see, for example, this was personal to me because I remembered when I worked in the technical area in criminal investigation for DCI, if I needed a solution, and everybody does this, you're a department head or you're working in there, a problem is given to you, you solve for that problem and you get it. But when I was working for the Attorney General, I had no idea, nor did I care what was going on at health or environmental quality or any of that. The paradigm shift comes when I go to work for the governor's office and I see a request from an agency saying, we need to solve for X. And they go out to an RFP, and we get a bid back. And in this particular case, I recall it being just under $3 million for this technology solution. Then we see another agency go out to RFP, and we see their needs and their statement of work and the contracts, and these are so parallel. And this particular agency got a bid for somewhere around $400,000. Well, we needed to leverage that. We needed to bring those together. We needed to have one set of development plans and tools, and the actual state of Wyoming actually got an award for that, a national award from the National Association of Chief Information Officers, for building libraries and platforms where all of that software and that code could be saved and then reused and distributed. For example, we built them, they reside and they run on GCP. Then another agency comes in, their last bid was, I think in the case of our administration and information on a bid waiver project, somebody was going to build it for them around $500,000–$600,000. we were able to leverage that existing code and bring that to fruition for under 80 grand. So that, again, it's this huge, you can't stress that the collaboration and communication aspect enough. It's where it really begins to pay off for everything.
So you guys have done some really cool stuff with education in Wyoming and improving that. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I talked a little bit about the unified network and the connectivity to the schools, where we went from sort of the bottom of the pack to the best in terms of connectivity to our schools. And that, you know, it's not just in a rural state, but any state, I just think that is such a key in today's environment in terms of giving our school-age children the best chance of success. In addition to that, we have a program, Wyoming for Life, which is courtesy of Google, which allows a student to, when they get their email address, to be able to keep that and to store information on that, not just when they're in school and having to change that every year, but through their college career and beyond. And it also applies to parents of kids. So I'm a Wyoming for Lifer, and it is so great for those kids to be able to have that information, to keep that information through the years as they go through the school program. And so I think it's really, you know, education is fundamental to the success of the individual, to the community, and the state. And you got to have great education, and to do that in today's world, you have to have that connectivity and as many tools available to the kids as possible.
Absolutely. It's interesting because I feel like the education piece of it was one of the reasons that Arizona chose to go Google. My boss, Doug Lang, is our Chief Strategy Officer, and he's always likes to hone in, and I think they dropped the statistic this morning of 90 million students and faculty are using G Suite. So those folks that are coming into the workforce that we're going to be hiring, these are the tools that they're using. These are the tools that they're expecting to have their hands on. And our project team is a perfect example of that. We have 2 killer interns on our project team. They've never used anything but G Suite. So they're a huge asset to us, but this is the future workforce. This is who we're hiring, and this is what they're expecting.
Well, that's true. This education is the backbone of I think, any of this innovation and technology that we did. When the governor, I recall sitting down with Flint, and I said, you know, we need this backbone. Flint basically was the architect for this. Came together and sat down and said, we're going to build this layer 2 network, and we're going to spread it out across the state, and we'll spoke out from 8 different aggregation points, and we're going to run it at 10 gig. And we presented that to the governor, and the governor listened for about somewhere between 8 and 10 seconds, and said, I remember Flint saying it, and then at some point down the road, we're going to be able to kick it up to 100 gig. And the governor just said, I want you to go 100 gig, and you go 100 gig today. Keeping in mind, this is in 2012, 2013. I said, wow. Will we ever use 100 gig? I just couldn't imagine that. Are you kidding me? We're bumping up on 90 of it now. So it's just with the students' use. So this network was built, and it was done in a very unique fashion. It was done with partners in the communications arena. We did not give single contracts or anybody to build this. All of the aggregation points reside actually on state soil, so there's no conflicts with co-locating with different vendors and that. It was a unique situation, and it took a lot of political chutzpah to make that happen. And the governor brought that about, but now we see the speeds are increasing, and costs are decreasing, and frankly, I've heard from many CIOs around the country, it's a real envy to be able to provide, 100 gig, and then we now peer directly to Google, so all of our storage and everything, we consume far less internet expense bandwidth than we ever have in the past. It's been a real boon.
Awesome, thank you. So I think we're running up on time, and we're getting into people's happy hour. So I have one last question for you guys. What else would you share? There are a lot of public sector entities that are out there, cities, states. and other government entities. What can you tell them that will make their migration smoother and improve their productivity and collaboration?
Well, Heather, I think I'd go back to what I originally said is, you know, because I saw the problem and I saw this as a solution, I sort of assumed everybody would eagerly adopt that, and that was my mistake. And I think you just have to recognize you have to take the time to point out to people what the solutions are and how they will help improve the work that they do, their efficiency, the confidence in the system. And so that would be for anybody thinking about making the switch, and you have good stories about this too. You just got to take the time to recognize that people, they become, you know, very attached to whatever they're using and they don't like the change. But if you can show them the advantages to it and take time to do that, and then have the training, the necessary training, not only in-house, but, you know, from Google as well, I think it will make this transition much smoother.
It's just important to remember that, you know, anytime you're doing any of this technical innovation, it's disruptive. And you hope that that disruption is ultimately positive. You know, I remember having a conversation with somebody who said, you know, we're going to embrace this change. We're going to do everything. We're really on board. We want to do that, just so long as we don't have to do anything different. Okay? Yeah, that didn't really work out well. You are going to do things different, and you're going to have to embrace it, and you're going to have to, but give this a chance, give it a try. Ultimately, at the end of the day, and anybody who's looking at this, I would tell you that do your due diligence. You don't, you know, we're here because we use Google, but we did that. We came to that decision by a deep dive and looking at what the citizens need, what our constituents need, what our schools need, what government needs, and that's where we landed. And it's an easy, it's an easy arrival at that particular solution. I mean, ultimately, when we first started, the saving governor said on the film $1 million. It was actually about $6 million was the difference that we paid, or that we netted. It was a big, huge win for us. Will that be that way tomorrow? I don't know. I can tell you that Google has been our single best partner in any of these endeavors that we've had. They've been very, very helpful. And I really hope that that continues. But do your due diligence and do what's right, and you'll come to these same conclusions.
Awesome. All right, well, I'm incredibly grateful to have gotten the chance to talk with you guys today. I know everybody in the audience is very grateful to have heard your story. Thank you for being the first state and for sharing everything with us today.